Hey there, this is Veena from Cake, the channel that's about baking and much more. A warm welcome to my channel. With Christmas just around the corner, let's make a quicker and easier version of the traditional Christmas cake or Christmas fruit cake, but without any rum or any other alcoholic drink. I'll show you how to adapt it though to make it with rum. This recipe is so easy. It's like a one-pot Christmas cake. It requires no prior soaking of the fruits, no vigorous beating, and no heavy-duty equipment. Usually, the mixed dried fruits that go into the Christmas cake are first hydrated by soaking them for a few weeks in an alcoholic liquid like rum. The prior soaking moistens and plumps up the fruit so that they don't soak up the moisture from the cake batter while baking and make the cake dry. But in this recipe, boiling the fruits in the flavorful liquid plumps them up. That too, in just a few minutes. Also called a boiled fruit Christmas cake, this is a super delicious, moist and aromatic fruit cake. And I'm going to show you how to make it right now at Cake. Before we start putting our cake together, we have to prepare the caramel that will give it a rich brown color and boil the dry fruits. We'll start with the caramel, which by the way can be prepared a few days in advance. Here I have half a cup of granulated sugar in a thick-walled vessel. My flame is on medium. I'll add 2 teaspoons of water to the sugar to moisten it and speed up the caramelization process. In this method, you shouldn't stir the melted sugar with a spoon at all. As it begins to start caramelizing, just gently swirl the contents of the vessel around. And when the caramel becomes dark brown in color, turn off the heat and carefully add a 1/4 cup of water to it, while at the same time continuing to swirl the liquid in the pan. Then turn on the heat again and let the syrup come to a boil. Let it simmer for a minute or two and then turn off the stove. The caramel syrup will thicken on cooling. Now for the dry fruits, we need to chop the larger ones into smaller pieces of around a centimeter in size. To this vessel, I'll first add 100 grams of golden raisins, that's half a cup plus 1.5 tablespoons. Some of them were large. I cut each of these larger ones into 2 pieces. This is 100 grams or half a cup plus 1.5 tablespoons of seedless black raisins. I had to cut each of these into 2 parts. Next, I'll add 10 dried apricots. They weighed 60 grams. I removed the seed from them and then chopped them like this. I'll also be adding candied cherries, candied peel or tutti frutti, and dates, but these don't need to be boiled and plumped up, so I'll add them later. Next, we'll add the zest of 1 orange, that's 1 tablespoon. Now let's add 170 grams or 3/4 of a cup plus half a tablespoon of salted butter, 130 grams or half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of granulated white sugar. You could also use brown sugar if you want, and 3/4 of a cup of orange juice. I got this from 3 oranges. You could also use packaged orange juice instead. I've also added 3 tablespoons of water off camera. Finally, let's add the caramel we prepared. See how thick and dark it is. The color of your cake will depend on how dark or how light your caramel is. Instead of caramel syrup, you could add 3 tablespoons of molasses. To make this a rum and fruit cake, replace half of the orange juice with some good quality rum. Now let's turn on the heat and with the flame on medium, stir everything well till the mix comes to a boil. After that, I'll turn the heat down and let the mix simmer for around 5 to 6 minutes with occasional stirring. I'll now turn off the heat and let the mix cool to room temperature or almost room temperature. The mixture will thicken considerably on cooling. We'll prepare our cake batter later on in the same vessel. In the meanwhile, I'll prepare the pan for baking. This is an 8-inch round pan, but you could also use a square 7-inch pan. I've greased the sides and the bottom of the pan already. This being a heavy, dense cake that we have to slow bake for a longer time, I'm using a double lining of parchment paper for the bottom and the sides, because we don't want the cake to burn on the outside before it's completely baked inside. See that the parchment paper around the sides extends around 1.5 inch above the rim of the pan after making a fold of around 1.5 inch at the bottom end. Having a broader piece of parchment paper around the sides protects the cake from getting overheated. Make straight or slanting cuts at intervals of around 1.5 inch along this folded part. Now, when you line the sides like this, the parchment paper will take the shape of the pan. Let's now push down the cutouts prepared for the bottom of the pan. That done, let's sift 1 3/4 cup of maida or all-purpose flour, along with 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder. Fruit cakes need less baking powder and don't rise too much. Let's mix this and then add 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, followed by 3/4 teaspoon of grated nutmeg, 1 teaspoon dried ginger, you could also add grated fresh ginger, and 8 cloves that I've ground finely. Let's mix the dry ingredients again. Here I have 3 eggs, which I'll whisk lightly with a fork. Our fruit mixture has cooled. To it, we'll now add the rest of the fruits. I'll add 70 grams, that's half a cup of chopped dates, 70 grams, that's a 1/4 cup plus half a tablespoon of candied cherries chopped into small pieces, and 100 grams, that's half a cup of tutti frutti or candied peel. Let's mix all of this well with the boiled dry fruits. Next, we'll stir in the whisked eggs and an interesting ingredient, rum extract. Those of you who don't want to use rum in the cake, or like me don't have rum at home but want to add a rum-like zing to your cake, could use this if it's available where you live. I'll add 2 teaspoons of this. In place of rum extract, you could add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Let's stir everything. We'll now add in the flour mix in 2 portions, mixing well after each addition. But don't beat vigorously or overmix the batter. Last of all, we'll stir in half a cup or 50 grams of chopped almonds and a 1/4 cup or 30 grams of chopped cashew nuts. The batter should be sticky and have a dropping consistency. If you find it's too dry, stir in around 1 tablespoon of water. Let's now transfer the batter to the prepared cake pan and level the top. Then we'll tap the pan on the work surface a few times to get rid of any trapped air bubbles. Bake the cake at 160 degrees centigrade, that's 325 Fahrenheit, in the center of the oven for 50 minutes, and then at 150 degrees centigrade or 300 Fahrenheit for around 30 to 45 minutes more. My cake took a total of 1 hour and 25 minutes to bake, 50 minutes at 160 centigrade and 35 minutes at 150 centigrade. Since ovens and baking times differ, I suggest testing the cake with a skewer after around 1 hour and 15 minutes. If the skewer doesn't come out clean, bake the cake for a further 10 minutes and repeat the test, baking the cake till it passes the skewer test. After you take the cake out of the oven, let it cool completely in the pan on a wire rack. After 1 hour and 10 minutes from the start, I had covered the cake with this piece of parchment paper to prevent it from getting burnt spots on the top. Let's cover the pan with a kitchen towel so that it doesn't lose too much moisture whilst cooling down. Since a Christmas cake is a dense one, packed with loads of fruit, you can't unmold and cut it right away. It's best to let it rest overnight and become firm enough to cut. Now that we've rested the cake, let's unmold it. The cake hasn't got burnt at all at the bottom. Let's upturn it again. If you're going to bake this cake, say around a week before Christmas, to make sure the cake continues to stay moist for the next few days, here's what you could do. For a rum cake, poke holes into the top with a skewer and then pour 3 to 4 tablespoons of rum through the holes and cracks in the cake. If you're making a non-alcoholic cake, you'll have to skip this step. Next, wrap the cake tightly in cling film or parchment paper and then in aluminium foil. And store it in an airtight container or transfer the wrapped cake to a plastic bag. But don't ever wrap the fruit cake directly in foil. The acid in the cake will corrode the foil, and this in turn could spoil the taste of your cake. When stored properly, the cake will stay moist and good for around 8 to 10 days or more at room temperature. After that, you could store the wrapped and packed cake in the fridge, where it will keep good for around a month. But if and when you're ready to cut and serve the cake, you could brush the top and also the sides if you want with some diluted jam, either apricot, fig, apple, pineapple, or whichever jam you have. This is 1.5 tablespoons of pineapple jam that I boiled with 2 teaspoons of water. Now this is an optional step meant to seal the moisture in the cake and prevent it from drying quickly, and also give it a glaze and a more appealing look. For a rum cake, you could brush it with rum. Give the jam or rum layer around half an hour to set before cutting and serving the cake. As long as it lasts, keep the cake wrapped in parchment paper and foil. Okay, time to slice our cake. Now whether you're using a serrated knife or a straight edge one, make sure it's sharp. A blunt knife won't cut through the fruits cleanly, and the cake will crumble. Cut it into wedges like this, or into thick slices. If necessary, chill the cake in the fridge for some time before slicing it. Let's take a bite. Wow, the cake is moist and just bursting with flavor. Do give my easy recipe a shot and then share your delicious homemade Christmas cake with loved ones and friends. Next week, I'll be making a much requested recipe for traditional nyuryo or karanjis. So do check it out. And till we meet again, happy cooking!